Greetings and salutations everyone, my name is Kiorkof and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're talking about my Week 15 running back rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, we're going to be talking about all things related to the running back position, beginning with matchups. We'll talk about which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing running backs thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. That's correct. All the rankings throughout the week are at a half PPR scoring format. After we, of course, cover the matchups at the position, we'll go ahead and move on to our top 36 rankings. Again, rankings are always subject to change as it says on screen. For those of you who are trying to stay up to date on my latest rankings, you can either support on the Patreon channel where you can get all of your 2020 fantasy football questions answered along with flex rankings, up-to-date rankings, all that kind of jazz, and extra content via the Discord. Outside of that, you could also show up Sunday morning 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Kickoff with Kiorkof. We're talking about all things related to the fantasy football season. I'm thinking about perhaps extending it an extra hour for this week, potentially starting at 7 a.m. and then ending at 10 a.m. I don't know if I'm going to do it because, again, there are Saturday games, so I will have a live stream Saturday morning and Sunday morning. So I don't think I'm going to need the extra hour for Sunday morning because I could potentially answer questions on Saturday. But regardless, there will be a live stream 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Saturday and this upcoming Sunday. So make sure you guys are aware and show up if you'd like to get, some up-to-date rankings in terms of fantasy football. It should be exciting. Outside of that, again, I want to thank you guys for the incredible support. For those of you who have been around the channel for quite some time, continue to like the videos, continue to share it, and helping us get to this next goal of 36,000 subscribers. I cannot thank you guys enough. Again, for those of you who are supported on Patreon, again, you guys have made a huge difference in order to continue my progress here and continuing my efforts to helping you guys win some championships. Again, if you have not yet already, click the subscribe button, join the community. Again, it really does help me out a lot. And again, we're making fantasy football content even through week 17. We'll talk about some NFL playoffs in January, February, all that kind of jazz, and how we could potentially begin to prepare for the 2021 season. Okay, now that we've covered all that, let's get into our Week 15 running back section of the video. Before we begin, I wanted to actually mention a couple names via waiver wires that have to do with the running back position. First and foremost, I wanted to mention Gus Edwards because, again, he did have a great performance last night on the Monday Night Football game. I think the best game of the season thus far between two teams in the division fighting for a playoff spot. Both these teams competed heavily. 47-42. What a shootout. Gus Edwards scored twice. That does increase his overall value in my eyes going into this upcoming week, making him potentially the number 2 option. And he's going to be included on today's video because, again, they do play against the Jacksonville Jaguars, making it so much easier to potentially pick him up and play him. Outside of him, the only other waiver wire option I wanted to mention is Rashard Higgins. We mentioned him on last week's episode, Week 14's waiver wire pickups. Again, mention him for this week because he did score, have 10 targets, 6 catches, 68 yards. Makes a big difference. All right, we can go ahead and move on and start talking about some matchups at the running back position, beginning up with the defense that gives up the most points to opposing running backs. That is the Detroit Lions. And unfortunately for the Detroit Lions, they will be subject to Derrick Henry and him running all over that defense. It is going to be very difficult for a team that already gives up the most points to opposing running backs to stop the best National Football League running back at this current moment, a guy that is on pace to potentially surpass 2,000 rushing yards. It's going to be nice to see. Either way, a fantastic matchup. Of course, the Houston Texans, they are still giving up the most rushing yards per game to opposing running backs. They will take on Jonathan Taylor, who is coming off a giant week against the Las Vegas Raiders. Of course, we know that the Las Vegas Raiders can't stop the run. That is why he produced as well as he did, and that's why the Las Vegas Raiders, they're giving up the 3rd most points to opposing running backs. That surely will help the overall productivity and base floor line of a guy like Austin Ekeler, who, yes, he's not scoring touchdowns at this current moment in time, but if you go ahead and you give him that good of a matchup, he doesn't even need the touchdowns, the receptions, the yardage on the ground and through the air, gives him enough value to make him a valuable prospect, of course, with upside. We got the Green Bay Packers taking on Mike Davis. Unfortunately, we will have Christian McCaffrey missing this week, but Mike Davis, just off this past week's performance, proven that he could take care of this matchup. The Jacksonville Jaguars take on the Baltimore Ravens. They've got 3 running backs, Lamar Jackson, J.K. Dobbins, and Gus Edwards. All of them should be able to go off on that defense. The Dallas Cowboys, of course, giving up the 2nd most rushing yards to opposing running backs and giving up at least a touchdown per game this season. Regardless of whether or not it's going to be Raheem Mostert or Jeff Wilson Jr., I think, again, those two guys will be able to succeed regardless because of how Kyle Shanahan and this offense functions. And it's just going to be too easy of a matchup for them, in my opinion. The Tennessee Titans, of course, give up a lot of points to running backs of the Carolina Panthers, the New York Giants, and the Denver Broncos. We'll talk about each of those players that are going against those matchups as we, continue throughout the video. Just wanted to give you guys some perspective on some of the better matchups as it has stayed consistent throughout the weeks and how we could potentially take advantage of said matchups. Either way, now that we've covered that, we can go ahead and move on and start talking about some of the tougher matchups of the position. Of course, the Arizona Cardinals, Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, they're in the middle of the pack. We're not really looking for those. We're looking at the matchups that are really difficult. The New Orleans Saints give up the fewest points to opposing running backs for a reason. And though Miles Sanders had himself a game, they are still one of the toughest defenses, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be able to, is he going to be able to put together a great game? Sure, he got more utilization in the passing game, but on the ground, will he find success considering he didn't really find much against the Miami Dolphins? Pittsburgh Steelers have always stopped the run, and they'll continue to do so this upcoming week. The Los Angeles Rams playing against the Jets. The Jets are in trouble. Washington playing against the Seattle Seahawks. We'll talk about how that pertains to what kind of upside or value Chris Carson could potentially have this week. The San Francisco 49ers playing against Zeke. Zeke has kind of been bottled up over the last couple of weeks. Can he potentially have a breakout week here against a tough defense? The Falcons, of course, played strong against opposing running backs, and so have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Both those teams playing against one another. Okay, now that we've covered that, we can move on to our actual top 36 running back rankings for Week 15 of the 2020 fantasy football season. Okay, I'm going to try to talk about each player for a minute, and we'll make this a 40-minute video like we typically do. I want to be quicker because, again, I've been talking about these players for the last 14 weeks straight. But again, it should be, plain and simple. The best players are to be started. Your studs must be played. Do not get too cute with it. Let's get into this, shall we? Beginning off with our number one, Derrick Henry, the king of the running back position at this current moment in time, playing against the easiest matchup at the running back position, like we mentioned. He's coming off of a week in which he had 35.2 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format, besides the fact that he surpassed 200 total rushing yards and had himself 2 rushing touchdowns. He only needs to average 156 yards for each of the next 3 games to be the 8th player in NFL history to have 2,000 rushing yards in a single season. Derrick Henry is on pace, and I think he's going to dominate against this Detroit Lions defense. This is exactly when Derrick Henry goes off. Late season, playoff football, run the ball in December. That is Derrick Henry's forte. We're going to continue to see him feast as the weeks progress. We have Dalvin Cook as our number 2. Playing against some of the tougher matchups. I mean, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are one of the better defensive lines and front sevens in the National Football League, but it didn't matter to Dalvin Cook. He still had himself over 100 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, accompanied by a little bit of work in the passing game, even though it wasn't as influential in terms of his overall fantasy total this week. I think, sure, as the weeks progress, he's still going to get more and more work in the passing game and get higher totals there, which will overall increase his value. He's coming off of a week of 18 fantasy points. I'll take that any single day of the week, especially against a tough matchup. This upcoming week, he takes on the Chicago Bears. The last time he played against the Chicago Bears, he ran the ball over 30 times, had about, over 100, just barely over 100 all scrimmage yards from, on the ground and through the air. But the question remains, what are the Chicago Bears going to put in front of Dalvin Cook? Are they going to be able to stop him? I personally think as of the last couple of weeks, the Chicago Bears haven't been as great in terms of stopping the run. Alvin Kamara, 163 all-purpose against them. The Packers running back duo of Jamaal Williams, Aaron Jones, 163 and 1 touchdown against them. And Adrian Peterson just recently 57 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. So again, there's always an opportunity for Dalvin Cook to continue to feast, and that is why he's our number 2. We have Jonathan Taylor as our number 3. Jonathan Taylor is finally coming into his own. It has taken a while, whether it's injuries or him just not producing well, or whether the offense just wasn't functioning at its maximum capacity. It has taken a while, but finally, he's coming off of a game of 20 rushing attempts for 150 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 29.5 fantasy points. This upcoming week plays against the second easiest matchup at the running back position, the Houston Texans, who, just a couple weeks back, he played against them, had 135 all-purpose yards and a touchdown. We're talking about other running backs like David Montgomery just this past week, 155 yards and a touchdown against them. And the backfield of the Cleveland Browns just a couple weeks back combined for 258 yards and a touchdown against Houston. It's an unstoppable force going against a defense that just can't stop a soul. I mean, let's just be honest. Houston is struggling defensively. Jonathan Taylor should be able to feast this week. We have Nick Chubb, who, again, last night on Monday Night Football had a fantastic performance. I mean, again, In terms of fantasy points, 23.3, having himself over 80 rushing yards, getting himself some utilization in the passing game, and scoring twice on the ground. That is all you can ask for. Playing against the New York Giants, the 9th easiest matchup at the running back position. Again, the New York Giants, as of the last couple of weeks, we had Kenyan Drake go for 90 yards and a touchdown. We had Carson, 110 yards and a touchdown against them. And the Eagles backfield, the combination of Miles Sanders and Boston Scott, 169 and a touchdown against that defense. So just recently, the New York Giants, even though they are a better defense, they've been struggling against opposing running backs. I think Nick Chubb, as he continues to feast, should be another great option this week. He's not slowing down anytime soon. This offense is predicated on running the ball. They'll continue to do so in the next 2 weeks. We have Alvin Kamara as our number 5. Thank goodness Alvin Kamara started catching the ball, because he's going to have to do a lot of that this week in order to stay up to pace with the Kansas City Chiefs offense. Again, that offense is going to score every time they come down the field. And even though the contest between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins at the end of the game really did look close, it was more of a one-sided affair than many people may kind of admit. A lot of tip passes leading to interceptions. If those don't go in the way of Miami, Patrick Mahomes is scoring on those drives and really extending a lead. So it's going to be tough for the New Orleans Saints to try to keep up. But a promising thing that we have seen over the last couple of weeks with Alvin Kamara is consistency of scoring touchdowns. That in itself is giving him more and more value. The fact that he had 10 targets with Taysom Hill definitely lends to more and more potential upside. 7 catches, 44 yards. I'll take that. I mean, it's better than what we were getting, 1 catch for -1 yard. So as of right now, perfectly fine there. In terms of the Kansas City Chiefs and their ability to stop running backs, they're not great. They're not the best team in terms of stopping the run, and they obviously, based on last week, can't really stop receiving backs. Lynn Bowden, the half running back, half wide receiver fantasy option, he had himself 7 catches for 82 yards just this past Sunday. So that in itself, kind of a precursor to potentially what Alvin Kamara is capable of. Melvin Gordon went for 142 all-purpose yards against them. Christian McCaffrey, 69 on the ground and a touchdown, along with 10 catches, 82, and a receiving touchdown the last time they played against Carolina. So, again, they can give up some yards through the air. Hopefully, we'll see some utilization and see Taysom Hill continue to use Alvin Kamara like he did in the second half of that Philadelphia game. We have Austin Ekeler as our number 6 running back. Austin Ekeler is one of the best running backs in the National Football League. The fact that he's scoring 19 plus points is not a surprise. The fact that he's catching the ball 9 times on 9 targets for 67 yards shouldn't surprise anybody. I mean, he's coming off of a week in which, sure, he had a tough matchup against the Atlanta Falcons, but still found utilization even without getting himself much work down on the goal line and their offense struggling. He was still able to be a consistent running back play, and that's what he should be every single week. In the last 3 games, since coming back from his injury, he's had 34 total targets. I don't think there's another running back that's even moderately close to that number. And the fact of the matter is that Ekeler, of course, playing against the Las Vegas Raiders, it's not easy. I mean, it's not even just the fact that it's an easy matchup, but that now he could finally get that touchdown upside. Besides the fact that he can catch the ball 11 times or 9 times or 8 times, he's going to accompany that with potentially a touchdown this week, giving him even more upside. I mean, we're talking about Jonathan Taylor going for 165 and 2 touchdowns. Ty Johnson went for 117 and a touchdown. The Falcons' backfield, whether it was Ito Smith or Brian Hill that week that Todd Gurley was out, combined for 130 and a touchdown. So again, fantastic matchup. Ekeler, a monster play this week. David Montgomery is my number 7. Okay. Again, David Montgomery has been unstoppable as of late. And to be honest, the fact that David Montgomery is a top 12 running back thus far this season from weeks 1 through 14 is insane. But just the last 3 weeks, he has averaged 23 fantasy points per game. He is absolutely losing his mind and dominating. And that mainly has to do with the fact that he's getting a lot of work in the passing game. Don't forget that the absence of Tariq Cohen has really made a difference in David Montgomery's overall productivity. In the last 3 games alone, he is averaging 4 receptions and 40 receiving yards. That in itself is a 6-point influx of points in a half PPR. That's an extra touchdown every week, besides the fact that, again, he has scored a touchdown each of the last 3 weeks minimum, sometimes 2. So again, he's coming off of a week of which he had only 11 rushing attempts, but 113 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, 3 catches on 4 targets for 42 receiving yards. Again, playing against the Minnesota Vikings, I'm not afraid of it. Minnesota's given up 80 yards and a touchdown to Rojo this past week. James Robinson the week prior, 108 yards and a touchdown. Zeke, 114 yards and a touchdown. I think David Montgomery will continue his streak of consistency. Man, what a couple good matchups will do to a running back. It's beautiful to see. Our number 8 for this week is James Robinson, the running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars, that even though he's coming off of a little bit of a lackluster performance, having himself 67 rushing yards on 12 rushing attempts, only getting, 3 receptions on 4 targets. Those are pretty decent stats. If you get a touchdown called back, that makes a pretty big difference too. Otherwise, he's, an easy 18-point play last week. The question remains, what could we potentially see from him this upcoming week against the Baltimore Ravens? Regardless, I think the fact that Gardner Minshew's coming back lends to his total upside, because again, when Gardner Minshew was the starting quarterback with this team earlier this season, James Robinson was getting a lot more targets and a lot more routes run out of this backfield, more opportunity leading to more fantasy success. I think the fact that the Baltimore Ravens, as of the last 2 weeks, have struggled in terms of stopping the run against pretty good running teams does potentially help James Robinson and his overall value. We're talking about Nick Chubb going for 2 touchdowns and 103 total yards. We had, Kareem Hunt scoring a touchdown, having 110 total yards yesterday in Monday Night Football's game. And of course, the week prior to that, Derrick Henry, 133 yards and a touchdown against that Baltimore Ravens defense. So again, there are a lot of potential for running backs to succeed against Baltimore, and I think James Robinson is definitely up to the task at hand this upcoming week. We have Mike Davis as our number 9. Again, I mentioned it before, Christian McCaffrey is going to miss this week with that quad strain. If you're a McCaffrey owner, it has been rough, but Mike Davis has been able to fill in and be the stud that we wanted him to be. This past week, Mike Davis went for 51 rushing yards on 11 rushing attempts, 5 yards per carry average. I'll take that any day of the week. We have ourselves also the fact that he scored 2 rushing touchdowns against the Denver Broncos defense and got himself utilization in the passing game. 6 targets, 5 receptions for 42 yards, continues to increase his value, takes on the Green Bay Packers, who are giving up the 4th most points to opposing running backs this season. Just this past week, DeAndre Swift, 50 total yards and a touchdown. David Montgomery the week before, 143 and a touchdown. Jonathan Taylor went for 114 against that defense. James Robinson went for 112 against that defense. I'm telling you, there is so much potential for Mike Davis this week as he continues to feast in this Carolina Panthers backfield. As they get more pieces back and healthy, like DJ Moore, it'll continue to extend drives and extend the possibility of Mike Davis scoring on a more consistent basis. We have Chris Carson as our number 10 overall running back this week. The reason I have Chris Carson this low, in my opinion, isn't because of, the Washington defense is tough. Yes, I'll admit it. They are a tough defense. They've played well. Their defensive line is fantastic. But Chris Carson has been unbelievable this season. In the games that he has played, he has just been the moniker of consistency every single time out. He is scoring touchdowns, getting utilization. But the issue that I find is the fact that he's not getting enough touches. I know they played against the New York Jets last week, and that isn't, the greatest game for him to have himself 30 carries. But to be honest, I want to see him get more utilization in this offense. 12 rushing attempts for 76 yards and a touchdown. We'll take that. 5 targets, 3 receptions, 22 yards, 17.3 points. He's got to get himself more touches, potentially get up to that 20 rushing attempt mark this upcoming week if they want to find success. I'm hoping that's going to be the case. The thing that I wanted to mention, again, the stat that I've continued to mention over the last 2 weeks continues to stay true. The starting running back of the Seattle Seahawks this season, from weeks 1 through 14, whoever it may be, whether it was Chris Carson in the beginning, or DJ Dallas, or Carlos Hyde, or Travis Homer, whoever it was throughout that span, has averaged 16.23 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format this season. Whoever the starting running back of the Seattle Seahawks is going to always have value, and I think that is going to be the case going forward, and that'll definitely be the case this upcoming week. The thing I also wanted to mention this past week, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., they combined for 96 yards and a touchdown. I think very easily Chris Carson could surpass that and have himself a fantastic game this week as our number 10. Number 11 is Aaron Jones. I've decreased Aaron Jones' ranking just a little bit in comparison to last week, mainly because, again, he's found himself a little bit inconsistent. He has a huge game, then he kind of flubs out if he doesn't score a touchdown. Huge game, flubs out. The inconsistency there does scare me, but again, he does play against the Carolina Panthers, giving up the 8th most points. Again, just recently, Melvin Gordon, 91 yards this past week, had himself a couple catches, of course, to surpass 10 fantasy points. We had Dalvin Cook the week prior, 82 yards. Ronald Jones, 198, and a touchdown against them just recently. So again, I still think that Aaron Jones, even though he didn't find utilization this past week in the offense against the Detroit Lions, which was the best matchup at the running back position, it does eventually have to go in his direction. And I think this could be one of those games. He's a guy that you're automatically starting because he's one of your star running backs. I'm just not as convinced that he could be the top tier guy if he's not getting upwards of 20 carries and getting those goal line touches that he so desperately needs. We move on to the next running back, which is Cam Akers, is our number 12. Man, I love this top 12 running back list, but there are names already here that I haven't mentioned that you're wondering where they are. There are so many good running backs in the National Football League right now, and there are so many good matchups this week. Cam Akers is coming off of a performance on Thursday night against the New England Patriots, in which he had 29 carries for 171 yards, 3 targets, 2 catches for 23 yards, and 20 fantasy points without even scoring a touchdown. The fact of the matter is, they take on the New York Jets this week, and that is one of the best matchups that you could possibly have because you're going to get up early and you're going to run the ball. Let's not forget, since week 12, Cam Akers has been the number 5 overall running back in fantasy in a half PPR scoring format. So just in the last 3 weeks, he's established himself as one of the best backs in the National Football League and in fantasy football specifically. In the last 2 weeks, he has had 50 total rushing attempts. 50. He's going to get the ball. He's going to feast. We're talking about Chris Carson, who just went for 98 total yards and a touchdown, along with Carlos Hyde, who ate up 16 carries in the second half, who got himself over 60 yards. I 100% believe that this Rams team wants to continue to run the ball, continue to feed Cam Akers the ball, and that is why he is this week's number 12, because he will find the end zone and get himself even more upside value this upcoming week. Our number 13 for this week is Miles Sanders. Now, many of you may be cursing my name out right now, saying, Andrew, why didn't you suggest that we play Miles Sanders last week? Well, he played against the best defense. He was coming off of 3 consecutive weeks of less than 10 fantasy points, and he wasn't getting enough opportunity in the backfield, but that all changed. The offense shifted in the direction of getting more opportunities for Miles Sanders, whether it was on the ground or through the air. And though this is the second time this season alone that he has played against the best run-stopping defense and had a great game, earlier this season against Pittsburgh went for a 75-yard touchdown. This past week against the New Orleans Saints went for an 85-yard touchdown. Let's not forget, the rest of his carries, he had 13 rushing attempts that led to 30 yards. That's a 2.3 yard per carry average. So Miles Sanders, yes, he did find the end zone twice, and that did save his week. Getting 4 catches for 21 yards is a huge upgrade, but he won't be playing against a tough defense this week. And that's why I have him at 13, because I do think that you can score very easily on the Arizona Cardinals defense. Cam Akers came off a performance of 94 yards and a touchdown against them, while Darrell Henderson in the same game, 64 yards and a touchdown. Carlos Hyde a couple weeks back, 95 yards and a touchdown against that defense. So Arizona has given up points to opposing running backs, and I think if Miles Sanders is going to continue to get a consistent streamline of opportunity, if he's going to get 18 touches, then of course he's going to produce. But if he's getting 6 rushing attempts and no receptions, how can we trust him, right? I think it's shifted. Now that we have a more efficient offense with the change of the quarterback position, we could see Miles Sanders continue to trend in the right direction. This is what I wanted for him. This is why I suggested him all season long, because he should be a stud in weeks 15 and 16 based on matchups. Hopefully, he'll pull through and continue to feast for us. We have Josh Jacobs as our number 14. Josh Jacobs played last week, even though he trolled many of you on Instagram. I know I got a lot of messages from people saying, hey, Andrew, is Josh Jacobs going to play? He said he's not going to play. Guys, just, anytime somebody puts the laughing emoji after it, you got to know that they're trolling you. But regardless, even though he, was injured all week long and wasn't really given that much opportunity in this game, he did see a good amount of touches. The fact that he caught the ball 3 times on 5 targets, had himself 13 rushing attempts. I'll take 16 rushing attempts on an injured week. Now going against the Los Angeles Chargers, who are giving up a lot of points to opposing running backs this season. Let's not forget the last time the Raiders played against them, 68 rushing yards and a touchdown from Jacobs and 68 total yards from Devontae Booker and a touchdown, along with the fact that Frank Gore had 71 yards and a touchdown against that defense, and Devin Singletary went for 102 yards against the Los Angeles Chargers defense recently. So again, the Chargers, they give up points. Josh Jacobs should be fully healthy potentially this week. Good play. Our number 15 for this week is DeAndre Swift. I'm glad that he actually scored a touchdown this last week, because otherwise we're going to see a little bit of a lesser performance, only getting 7 points. But hopefully he is fully healthy. There is no injury. There is no illness bothering and bogging him down potentially this week, because he's got a fantastic matchup playing against the 7th easiest matchup at the running back position against the Tennessee Titans, who they themselves gave up 106 yards to Chubb, 85 yards and a touchdown to Dobbins. 135 yards and 2 touchdowns to Nyheim Hines. Again, there are a lot of matchups in which running backs have taken advantage of the Tennessee defense, and 100% DeAndre Swift can do so. Hopefully he's fully ready to go, because again, this is a running back that thus far this season, in the games that he's played fully as the running back on this team, has at least on a minimum gotten 3 receptions per game. That kind of utilization in the passing game going into next year, but specifically going into this upcoming matchup, should continue to at least give him a flat baseline of upwards of 12 points a week. If you include a touchdown, we're in business. And I think based on the matchup, hopefully we won't see as much utilization of Adrian Peterson or Kerryon Johnson stealing touches and touchdowns. But that's why we have him at 15, because again, we got to make sure he's fully healthy and that no one else is taking away his touches from him. We have Kenyan Drake as our number 16 overall running back. Kenyan Drake has been unbelievable. And even though this season, earlier in the year, everyone was cursing his name, saying Kenyan Drake's a bum. I mean, since week 10, he has been the number 5 overall running back in fantasy half PPR. He has been unstoppable. In this upcoming week, they take on Philadelphia. And, Alvin Kamara went for 94 yards and a touchdown. Aaron Jones went for 148 yards and a touchdown. Chris Carson, 59 yards and a touchdown. Nick Chubb, 114 total yards. Wayne Gallman went for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns. People have been able to produce against the Philadelphia Eagles. It is not out of the realm of possibility. And I think Kenyan Drake, along with this offense, as they continue to feast, is going to get touches. I mean, he's coming off of a game of 80 rushing yards on 23 rushing attempts and a rushing touchdown. 15.5 fantasy points. That's typically what he's doing every single week. And I continue to trust him on a weekly basis, regardless of the matchup. He's just been playing out of his mind as of late. We have J.K. Dobbins as our number 17. So Dobbins, again, finds himself in the end zone for another consecutive week. In the last 3 games he has played, he is averaging 14.6 fantasy points. That in itself gives me a lot of confidence, along with the fact that they play against Jacksonville, giving up the 5th most points to opposing running backs. Let's not forget, Derrick Henry just went for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns against that defense at a relatively easy pace, 215 yards to be precise. On top of the fact that we had, Dalvin Cook go for 179 yards against that defense. Nick Chubb, 176 yards and a touchdown. Jacksonville can't stop running backs. Play your running backs against Jacksonville. First and foremost, Lamar Jackson, and then J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. But Dobbins, again, had the most touches amongst the entire backfield there with 13 rushing attempts for 53 rushing yards and a touchdown. As long as he gets more and more opportunity, it will lead to his success. I think he's got a great opportunity this week against Jacksonville. We have Kareem Hunt as our number 18. So Kareem Hunt had the best week that he's had in a very long time because, again, he found the end zone. That is going to be the biggest difference maker for Kareem Hunt. The fact that he got himself as much work in the passing game to lead to 6 catches, 77 yards. I mean, that's the most receiving yards and receptions that he's had all season long. And of course, it was required in that contest. Playing against the New York Giants, it may be required as well because they have a tough defense, but they can't stop the run. We mentioned it in relation to potential of Nick Chubb this week. Again, just recently, Kenyan Drake went for 90 yards and a touchdown. Chris Carson, 110 yards and a touchdown. And Boston Scott / Miles Sanders went for 169 yards and a touchdown against the New York Giants defense as running back. So again, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, both those guys are going to succeed. Hopefully we'll see, obviously we want Nick Chubb to get all the touchdowns. As a Nick Chubb owner, and I own a lot of shares of him, I want him to score. But I do think that Kareem Hunt is going to get himself some utilization. 6 carries for 33 yards last week. If you're averaging 5 yards per carry, you're scoring touchdowns, you're getting a lot of receptions, leading the team in receiving yards. It's going to be the biggest difference. But either way, just wanted to mention him as our number 18 because, again, the matchup serves very well for them this upcoming week as they're going to continue to run the ball and use their running backs at the highest possible capacity. We have Ronald Jones as our number 19. So the biggest question surrounding Ronald Jones is, does he have a broken finger? Because, that was the entire report that I've been following and trying to find updates regarding. That came out yesterday saying that Bruce Arians believes that he might have a broken pinky or something of that extent. If that's the case, then we can talk about Leonard Fournette this week. But if that's not the case, they did the x-ray and he's good to go because you either do have a broken finger or you don't. And we've got, it's just black and white at this point. So hopefully Ronald Jones is good to go. He's coming off of a great week without Leonard Fournette in the backfield impeding his total touches. 18 rushing attempts for 80 yards and a touchdown. We got a great running back here. Playing against Atlanta, I'm not even worried about it because I do think that this offensive line and this offense is talented enough to run the rock against Atlanta. So as long as Ronald Jones is healthy, ready to go, I think he's a great play this week as my number 19. We have number 20, Raheem Mostert. Now, here's the thing that a lot of people have also been mentioning regarding Raheem Mostert. Is he injured? Again, he had an MRI on Monday. Nothing has really come back saying that he's going to be out for this week because, again, let's not forget, on Sunday, he did leave the game early, but then returned and led the team in total rushing attempts. So again, Raheem Mostert, another great running back, even though he didn't have the best performance and Jeff Wilson Jr. did find the touchdown, he's still coming off of a game in which he had 65 rushing yards on 14 attempts, got himself 2 catches on 4 targets. So again, if he plays against the Dallas Cowboys, giving up these 6 most points and the 2nd most rushing yards to opposing running backs, why not? We're talking about a backfield that gave up 101 yards on 7 carries to Gus Edwards. J.K. Dobbins went for 71 and a touchdown. Antonio Gibson recently 136 yards and 3 touchdowns. And Dalvin Cook 160 yards and a touchdown. The 49ers are going to succeed against that backfield. It's only a matter of time until, of course, Raheem Mostert takes advantage of that this week. We have, of course, Wayne Gallman as our number 21. Wayne Gallman's another running back that Unfortunately, this past week got yoinked a touchdown. Dion Lewis fell into the end zone. The week prior, we had Alfred Morris steal 2 touchdowns. That has been a reoccurring theme, but even in that vein, I still think that Wayne Gallman is a very valuable running back that is just a touchdown away or a couple of touches away from being 13 to 14 fantasy points a week like he has been all season long since really taking over the job in like week 7 or 8. So again, playing against the Cleveland Browns, a defense that got torched on the ground from Dobbins, 53-1, Gus Edwards, 53-2. We also had James Robinson the week prior, 159 and a touchdown. Wayne Gallman should be a great player this week. I think that Giants team's continuing to try to compete, and Wayne Gallman is definitely their biggest threat offensively. Our number 22 running back for this week is Gus Edwards, and I'm going to be honest, I really do love this matchup against Jacksonville, giving up the 5th most points to opposing running backs. The fact that Gus Edwards is not getting a lot of touches doesn't scare me, because he's still averaging upwards of 7 yards per carry in the last 2 weeks. And the fact that he's falling into the end zone, has so many, gifted opportunities down in the red zone specifically. My goodness, how many times are we going to, beat around the bush? I'm 100% fine with starting Gus Edwards. Marking him has fallen out of the offense. And as long as this team is going to continue to run the ball and probably do it late in the game as they want to kill clock, they're going to find success out of both the running backs, whether it is Dobbins or Edwards. I think he's a great play. Again, Derrick Henry had 215 yards and 2 touchdowns. Why not 100 for each Dobbins and Gus Edwards? I know Gus Edwards gets less opportunities. That is why he is ranked lower. But he, again, still has so much opportunity this upcoming week. Melvin Gordon's our number 23. Now, a couple interesting stats that I want to mention via Melvin Gordon. In the last 4 weeks, he's the number 15 overall running back in fantasy. Of course, having a couple big games, one against the Kansas City Chiefs and one against Miami. But this past week, still found himself over 10.6 fantasy points. That is great. I'll take that any given day of the week. Totaling 91 total all scrimmage yards. Great. But unfortunately, this week they do take on Buffalo. Buffalo has been a defense that you could take advantage of in terms of running the ball on them. I mean, we earlier this season saw CEH dominate that defense. A very few times that CEH has dominated. We can definitely potentially see the Denver Broncos doing that to the Buffalo Bills defense. But just recently, getting, AJ Klein and Matt Milano really going in their linebacker positions, of course, with Edmonds, they're dominating in terms of filling holes and stopping the run. But I think there is still a possibility with Melvin Gordon's upside of catching the ball, 3+ times and Phillip Lindsay completely being irrelevant. It just continues to lend to potentially Melvin Gordon finding himself in the end zone and being a valuable play. Speaking of CEH that we just mentioned, he is my number 24 for this week because, again, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is, he's in a tough spot. Luckily for him, he caught the ball 5 times for 59 yards this last week because otherwise, he did have a pretty good running game early in the game. If you guys watched the last drive of the Kansas City Chiefs, he literally got, I think, negative 18 to 20 yards on the ground just based off of the offensive line just letting up and obviously Miami run committing to be able to stop the run. But regardless, I still think that there's a lot of value with Clyde Edwards this week against the New Orleans Saints, even though the New Orleans Saints are the better or one of the best run blocking defenses, run stopping defenses in the National Football League. I mean, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to not start Clyde Edwards because, again, this offense is so explosive that anybody can catch the ball and score, and especially get down into the red zone. And perhaps Clyde Edwards could find himself having a touchdown, or regardless, getting himself enough receptions and utilization and touches to where via yardage could be a great play. We move on to Nyheim Hines as the number 25. Now, Nyheim Hines has been a fantastic running back. In the last 4 weeks, he's the number 19 overall running back in a half PPR. And though he lands at the number 25 spot, it's mainly because, of course, we're seeing more and more utilization of Jonathan Taylor. But that being said, Nyheim Hines has had great performances in the last couple of weeks, playing against the second easiest matchup at the running back position against Houston. I mean, the last time he played against Houston 2 weeks ago in week 13, he had himself 10.7 fantasy points. So again, he is a great play. He's coming off of a game in which he had 7 carries for 58 yards, 4 catches on 4 targets for 17 yards, 9.5 fantasy points. So again, he is a great flex option, and that is why he begins our number 25 spot as like a fringe RB3, RB2 potential play going into this week. We have James Conner as our number 26. Now, I'm a little worried about James Conner. 10 carries, 18 yards, not going to cut it. But again, it is Cincinnati. They could take advantage of it. They could potentially reestablish the running game. And that's what I'm going to hope for. Because again, James Conner is a very sketchy play. He is similar to, some of the running backs I mentioned on a weekly basis. Play at, your own discretion. Because to be honest, he really could burn you in a very important week like week 15. So again, play at your own discretion. He is a tough running back to trust as of late because they haven't gotten him enough touches. The last time he played against Cincinnati, he wasn't utilized very often. It is tough to trust the starting running back of the Pittsburgh Steelers at this current moment in time. Jeff Wilson Jr. is our number 27. So here's the thing. Regardless of whether or not Raheem Mostert plays, I think Jeff Wilson still finds himself success because Dallas can't stop the run. And Jeff Wilson is getting himself 10 touches a game for the last couple weeks. So as long as that utilization is there, he's getting himself touches. He could even fall into the end zone, making both him and Raheem Mostert very valuable plays this week. If guys like Kyle Juszczyk are going to score rushing touchdowns, imagine if you just spread the love at the running back position, give it to either Jeff Wilson or Raheem Mostert. Both of them could be top 20 running backs this upcoming week. And that is why I have Jeff Wilson as our number 28 here. The next running back I wanted to mention is Ezekiel Elliott. So here's the tough part about Zeke. Can he be trusted? No. Do I like the matchup? No. But is he Zeke? Yes. Basically, is he capable of having a good game despite everything going against him? There's a potential there. There always will be for running backs because, again, you can bust out an 85-yard run like Miles Sanders did. But obviously, Zeke is not inclined to do that because he just has never had the burners for that, unless we go back to his college days. But either way, the whole thing is, can I trust Zeke in a Week 15 matchup? Probably not. That's why he is a number 28, ranked player, because he is an RB3. He's a guy that is on that fringe. Potentially, do I prefer a wide receiver at my flex, or do I want to play him there? Do I not have any other running back depth? It's a question that is going to continue to loom in my mind all week long. But as it currently stands, he has played well in the past against the 49ers, but this 49ers defense is a little different. They've been great against the run all season long. And at his current touches, 14 touches this past week? Just as many as Tony Pollard. It does scare me for Zeke's potential going forward, along with the fact that he has had a calf injury for the last couple weeks. So it is a little bit depressing, but Zeke, you sit at 28 because, again, you still have potential. Our number 29 for this week is David Johnson. He will be coming off of the potential injured reserve list to play this week. The last time he played against Indianapolis was just a couple weeks back. 10 touches on the ground, 44 yards and a touchdown, surpassed 10 fantasy points. We'll take it. He's not going to get work in the passing game. That is Duke Johnson's going forward. The only reason I have David Johnson here is because, again, if he's going to get himself 4 yards per carry and potentially touch the ball 12 plus times, that in itself could lend to a touchdown and getting himself into that RB3 conversation of surpassing 10 points. So again, he has the potential there. Is it 100% a guarantee? Absolutely not. But again, he still has the opportunity and is still the starting running back of his respective team. J.D. McKissic should be the starting running back of his team going into this week, considering the fact that he led the team in terms of yards per carry on the ground in terms of the rushing game, had 11 rushing attempts for 68 yards, only had 4 targets, 2 catches for 18 yards. It just seems to me that every time we try to play J.D. McKissic in hope that he's going to catch the ball, he just doesn't. This offense is so tricky, but touching the ball 13 times is great. We'd love to see him get 13 receptions, but that's just not the current reality of the situation. So as of right now, playing against Seattle, I'm hoping for the best for J.D. McKissic. I think he is a fantastic PPR option with upside, but in a half PPR, we leave him at 30 because, again, without the ability to score touchdowns and get more receiving work on a guaranteed basis, it's going to be tough for me to 100% start him. Damien Harris is my number 31. Again, playing against the Miami Dolphins is a great matchup, and I think Damien Harris can definitely succeed against that defense. I know, Bill Belichick is ready for this. Josh McDaniels, they play against this team twice a year, every year, and they know how to go ahead and attack this defense. Brian Flores knows what's coming. But regardless, I think Damien Harris, as he has gotten the weeks, progressing in his direction, he has been, a guy that hasn't scored a touchdown as of late. And we're seeing more utilization out of James White here and there, and Sony Michel and Cam Newton running on the goal line. That does hurt him overall, but I think this week could be one of those weeks where he falls into the end zone, surpasses 10 points, and gets himself a decent play overall. Zach Moss is our number 32. So again, Zach Moss is a sketchy play, just like any of these other RB3s potentially. But the question remains, what can he do against Denver, who's giving up the 10th most points to opposing running backs? Again, we did see, Mike Davis go 51 on the ground, 42 through the air, had himself 2 touchdowns. There is a very good possibility that the Buffalo Bills are able to score at will against his defense and run the ball late and potentially find Zach Moss in the end zone. Definitely a possibility of sorts. We have DeAndre Washington as our number 33. A lot of people have been talking about Lynn Bowden against the New England Patriots this upcoming week. I think DeAndre Washington is probably the most valuable guy because he will get the most touches out of the backfield specifically because, again, he's the starting running back of that team with Myles Gaskin out on the IR. Potentially Salvin Ahmed probably still going to miss. So as of right now, I like DeAndre Washington. 13 total rushing attempts. I think maybe if, in fact, we could see the Miami Dolphins shift around their offense a little bit, their offensive coordinator Chan Gailey, maybe, build something similar to what the Rams were doing this last week, there could be a chance for DeAndre Washington to find some success this week. Ito Smith is our number 34. I'm done with Todd Gurley. He's done. No more starting him. He's dead. We're going to move on to his backup because he gets more touches. Todd Gurley's knee is a complete waistline. They play against Tampa Bay, also a tough matchup, but Ito Smith, 11 carries, 42 yards this past week, is the receiving back or the primary receiving back in his backfield if they're going to use one, and therefore he is the number 34 running back on my list today. Jamaal Williams, another running back that is getting work, but hasn't been given too much as of late to lead to overall success. He did have 10 rushing attempts this past week, mainly because they're blowing out teams. They will blow out the Carolina Panthers, and that will lend to Jamaal Williams getting more touches, but it's not 100% guarantee that he's going to feast. But either way, Jamaal Williams does have potential. The last running back that I also believe has potential as a backup option is Chase Edmonds. Another week in which he had, 7 carries, 32 yards, 4 catches, 21 yards in a full PPR scoring format. We could see him get him, a couple more points here and there and being a solid RB3. As of right now against Philadelphia, I want to see more yardage and or a touchdown to get him into this conversation, and that's what I'm anticipating. But again, we have to be careful because Kenyan Drake has played very well as of late. Either way, those are my top 36, goodness gracious, running backs for this upcoming week. Thank you everybody for watching. Tomorrow we'll be talking about wide receivers again. We're going to try to hammer everything down before Saturday. There will be 2 games on Saturday, 1 Thursday night game, and everything else on Sunday and Monday. It should be a fun week. If you have any questions, comments, click the like button down below, subscribe to the channel, check out the Discord, check out the Patreon. I appreciate everybody supporting the channel. Until tomorrow, I'll see you guys. Peace.